to local board input. There's no local board input.
Pardon? Pardon?
Order, please. There's no order, please.
That's not
Order,
acceptable.
order, please.
That's not acceptable.
Extraordinary. We'll move on.
Bet you might.
Extraordinary business. Extraordinary business. We have no extraordinary business. We have a notice of motion. That notice of motion will be considered as the last item before we go into confidential. So I want to acknowledge that. Right. Now, we move on to item 11. Right. Where are our team from Auckland Transport? Chris, would you like to come up here, please? Chris, we were, is Claire and Peter here with you?
Their apologies.
Their apologies, right? Okay. Right, councillors, item 11, City Rail Link and Auckland Transport Alignment Project update. So this is an opportunity. Obviously there's been a considerable amount of progress made in the City Rail Link and also ongoing progress being made in the Auckland Transport Alignment Project. I want to acknowledge Councillor Bill Cashmore for his work and beside me on that project. But this is an opportunity in particular to get a sense of acknowledgement of how we are proceeding with regard to the #1 project under the Auckland Plan, the City Rail Link, and the fact that we are now starting to move in towards final negotiations relating to the deal that the government has agreed to move forward on. So we've got Chris Meal here, who is the CRL Project Director, and it's great to see you, Chris. Thank you very much for coming in. I want to acknowledge you and all your team on behalf of our council, and quite frankly the people of Auckland. This is a very, very significant project. It's now very close to formally starting, and so it would be helpful and useful for you to give us a little bit more information in terms of the update that's before us. Chris, welcome.
Thank you, Worship. Councillors, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm not sure quite how much time you've got, but there's a lot happening down at the project office in the AMP building. You'll see around the streets the evidence of the early works construction that's commenced, and that started just before Christmas last year with a blessing at Victoria Street, and so there is Hawkins and McConnell Dow, the Connectus contractor who's working on that package of work, has commenced that, and they're just at this stage just dealing with clearing away utilities in preparation for the pipe jack, which is a creation of a new stormwater down the eastern side of Albert Street. So that work's underway, and we're just finalising the negotiations with them for the main work, which will be the construction of the tunnels. And so that'll commence in June with the construction of the tunnels from Custom Street up to Wyndham Street, and Downers on the other side of the Queen Street and under the Britomart. They'll be commencing slightly after that with the Britomart package of the work, and Fletcher's have commenced their preparation just this week with the closing of the underpass under Queen Street. So you'll see construction hoardings all around there now. So there's quite a lot of work happening already in preparation for that main work. On the other side, and I guess more to the content of the paper here, is the discussions going on with your office, the Mayor, with Stephen and David Warburton at an executive level, and various of our team talking with officials in government about their emerging views of how they will participate in the governance of the project. And there's discussion still going on there, and I guess that'll be evolving in parallel with our other preparations over the next few weeks and perhaps months. The other big piece of work that's going on, we've just concluded excuse me, our industry engagement with contracting industry from around the world to share our views of how we would logically package the rest of the work, and that's the main works as we describe it, and that's obviously the piece that's subject to the joint funding of council and government. So we've just concluding that packaging work now, so we'll be announcing the way in which we're going to package the remaining work. Following our board next month, we'll be launching that on a public front to the market at large. So the team there very busy and will continue to be so.
Can you give us a little bit more info around sort of thinking in terms of how that might look?
The packaging?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's a very, very significant project, and we've been looking at a range of options as to how we might be able to conclude this project. So, give us a little bit more direction as to what the types of options are that might be available to us.
Well, just in terms of the work itself, there's a key differentiator in a project like this as opposed to a road tunnelling project, which many of us are familiar with, and that's the major impact that the rail systems has on the function of the rail beat. It's one thing to build a tunnel, but you have to fit it out with a whole lot of complex and interactive systems, and so we're looking at getting that as a separate package and getting that on board early, so that as the contractor who will ultimately deliver that, they will de-risk a lot of their activities in relation to what remains, which is a big piece of civil underground tunnelling and station building structure. The industry is specialised in various forms, and which is why we talk to a cross-section of those. So we see two big packages working in that frame. We've got another big piece, which is when we connect the east and west facing connections at Mount Eden. That's all has to be done in a live corridor space. So we'll be looking to separate that as a package of an alliance style, working closely with Kiwi Rail, because they own and control the network. We have to maintain a passenger service through that at the same time. And so we've been doing a lot of detailed staging as to how that might be brought about, and I think you saw that in your walkthrough recently. And then the other key package is the work which we will do at Britomart Station itself, where we have to build extra egress to the east, and also we're modifying the platforms. They have to be built wider than they are at the moment, because there just won't be enough. They're not big enough now to deal with the future load and throughput. That piece of work will happen after we've actually got the trains running through, because there's no way we can build it while the station remains in its present form. So effectively we'll end up with 4 big packages of work, and we're working through a whole procurement tender documentation strategy to fit with that.
Right, and just a couple of issues that I want to clarify. Firstly, the issue of the office. I'd like to ask you to invite the councillors and the local board chairs at least to actually come for a visit through the office. It's a pretty amazing site. Prime Minister and Minister of Transport went through recently. Hugely impressive. Something like 160 odd people are in there at the moment. Very, very innovative in that space with a lot of energy. So I encourage you to take the opportunity when it comes, councillors, to actually go down and have a visit with Chris and his team. Chris, the second issue is obviously it's a major project. We've seen that operating up and the impact of it around Queen Street and Albert Street and the enclosed environs. Assessment is 124 new projects, either starting now or in the very near future, within sort of 300 or 400 metres either side of the city rail link, either public or private projects, something like $6 billion over the next 4 years, so it's massive. Now what that means, of course, is considerable inconvenience. So can you talk to us a little bit about messaging? So we see that on the bus backs and all that sort of stuff already, the builders on. Messaging in terms of the impact on the community, and very clear messaging around what exactly is happening there that's causing the impact.
Yes, we're working closely with the council team. The City Integration Group is now reformed up in Albert Street there, so we're working with that team across the board, looking at all of the projects that are going on. The messaging about encouraging people to avoid the city in a motor car if they possibly can, that will continue. I've just left our Auckland Transport Executive meeting there. We've actually set up in the ATOC, the Traffic Control Group, there's people who are doing nothing else but watching the streams and the monitoring and looking at whatever massaging can be done around the traffic control, just to ease that on a I guess on a daily and a moment by moment basis. But we'll also have a continual review of the traffic flow itself, and we're not finished yet analysing the cumulative effects of those projects. If you recall, at the time the project was designated and the consent lodged and the notice of requirements were processed, we have an obligation under that to monitor the traffic flows and not have those deteriorate by more than a measure of something like a 30%. But of course, what's happened in the intervening period is the world has discovered Albert Street, and so you can see the amount of development going on. So we're actually having to have a real-time look at the cumulative effects of that. So that'll be an ongoing process. It's not right yet, but neither have we started the full effects yet. So we've got a team looking at that to make the best out of what will. No one can deny the fact it'll be a congested space for a number of years, and really leading cities have to cope with that and deal with that.
Yep, it's part of the reality of retrofitting a city. Okay, right, councillors, are there any further questions? Councillor Christine, or comments?
Mr. Chairman, I was very happy to move or second these recommendations.
Yep.
And in doing so, wanted to just pause for a moment and acknowledge the historic significance of this. This has been a very long overdue relationship with central government, and it would not have been possible without Auckland Transport. I know we've heard a bit of discussion about the merits or the demerits of CCOs, but frankly, this could not have happened, and I want to acknowledge the staff. I think, Chris, perhaps it isn't fully understood, but this is not just huge on a New Zealand scale, this is huge internationally as a project. And the experience that Chris, as the project manager, brings to this, and the way in which it has been able to really get some, I think, genuine attention, the level of the modelling, the financial data, it has, I think, had a level of professionalism that local government have not seen before. So in acknowledging our own CEO and the CEO of Auckland Transport and all of the teams that they have worked with that, I am well pleased with the wonderful representation of the issues that have been brought by yourself and Councillor Cashmore, and I think in authorising you to negotiate a joint business plan today, it really does recognise major progress for Auckland. So maybe, Chris, my question to you could be, you could talk a little bit about the team and the experience that they bring to this, and the way in which you are ensuring that this is, we often talk about intergeneration, but this is inter-electoral term-ish insofar as making sure that we can have a seamless transition in moving this project forward because of its significance. So Chris, could you talk about some of the experience that you have with you on your team on this?
Yes, it's interesting, as you say, these things come about, if you're lucky, once in a generation or once in 100 years in our case, but there are a strange group of people, and I'd have to count myself as one of them, who really like doing this stuff, and they not quite gypsies, but the team has involved experience from people who've worked around the world, and we've got a large team of, we call them our technical advisors. That's our engineering and architectural team, and they come from international consultancies. We've got Jasmax, who are local architect of repute and who did a great job on Britomart. They've partnered with Grimshaw, who's an international transport architect. They do work around the world. We've got Oricon and Mott McDonald, all of whom are international firms, specialists in their field. So they constitute our our technical advisor group. But in my management team, I've got people who've grown up in Crossrail, and they've done these projects around the world. In our planning team, we've done a lot of pioneering work through Deb Godinay's team in the consenting and designation. Our rail safety and systems people, I've hired people from the Middle East who are working on these projects as well. So there's an international mix of people who, for some weird and wonderful reason, love doing this stuff.